Well, let's spend a little more time talking about the business of cannabis and what to watch for, especially when it comes to marketing and advertising. To do that, I'm joined by Dr. Michael Mulvey, Assistant Professor of Marketing at the University of Ottawa's Telfer School of Management. And from Toronto, I'm joined by Rebecca Brown, a cannabis marketer and founder of Crown's Agency. Good to see you both. Thanks for being here to talk about this as the country gets set for legalization. Let me start with this. What is your opinion, each of you, what is your opinion of the marketing and advertising restrictions that the federal government has placed on the cannabis companies? Rebecca, let me start with you in Toronto.
What is my opinion? Well, I think essentially the framework that's being applied to cannabis is the Tobacco Act. My personal opinion is while there absolutely needs to be restriction around advertising and promotion, to compare cannabis to tobacco and handcuff cannabis and the ability of licensed producers to build brand, I think right now is overzealous. I think it's overkill.
All right.
I think it would be better if the framework were closer to what we see for alcohol than to box it in with tobacco.
Okay, Michael, how do you see this? Does this handcuff the cannabis producers, the rules around advertising and marketing?
Well, it may handcuff them to a certain extent, but really it's about informing consumers. And this is untreaded ground. And so there's not a lot of precedence here for other countries doing this, so we can look at their models. So they're taking some soft steps, some conservative steps, and trying to make sure that you balance responsibility with the right to be informed.
Do you see a balance there?
I see some balance, yeah. I think you can always look back and change things later, but it's hard to tighten things up after you've sort of got out of the corral.
Okay, Rebecca, you mentioned the word handcuffing the producers. How does it do that?
Well, I think that the current regulatory approach, I actually think limits the producers' abilities to educate and inform the consumer because it's so stringent. But you know, parking for a second, the handcuffs. Another issue that the industry is encountering right now that will be interesting to watch is there is as well a lack of clarity around how the existing framework should be interpreted from a use case perspective. So the industry is entering into post-prohibition or legalization on Wednesday without definitive and clear sense of what they can and can't do because the Act and the accompanying regulations are really subject to a significant amount of interpretation.
Let's talk about it. I mean, is there a clarity issue here, Michael? I mean, we've seen in the run-up to legalization, we've seen cannabis producers, with billboards. We've seen them sponsoring, different kinds of concerts and events, and there's some concerns that's targeting young people, and they won't be allowed to do any of that after legalization. Yeah. What about that?
Well, I don't know if it's a problem with the regulations or if it's a problem with the people who read the regulations. Because what you have is we're moving from being a medical marijuana model to being a recreational drug. Now, some people choose to focus more on the recreation, others more on the drug. And so with the drug, if you put that sort of in the foreground, then it should have similar regulations as an over-the-counter drug, for example, in terms of disclosure and responsibility.
Right. I mean, if the stated objective of the government, Rebecca, is to this is what the minister talks about, is to make sure that young people are educated about the risks, to make sure that legal cannabis can end up shoving out illegal cannabis in the black market and organized crime. But to do that, do you need marijuana companies that are actually making a profit and getting market share? And do you think these kinds of regulations will allow them to do that, to allow them to grow?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that in order to displace the existing black market, which is, by some estimation, is almost a $6 billion industry, you need to give the legal licensed entities the ability to develop a relationship with the customer. So, if you want to move people from that illegal framework over to a legal and licensed industry. So I think that, and I don't think the government would disagree. I think that there needs to be some ability to promote in order for that objective to be met. I agree that it is much easier to be stringent out the gate. It's hard to force people back into a framework, once certain behaviors are already in place. And I think that we will see navigation of this framework over time. But again, I think it's important for everyone to understand it is literally a cut and paste from the Tobacco Act. That's what is being applied to cannabis.
Michael, you want to jump?
Yeah. Well, I think actually the alcohol and tobacco, the tobacco model is an interesting one because the debate there has always been promoting the consumption of tobacco versus brands of tobacco. And I think when you talk about advertising, it's usually for a specific brand and trying to convey the unique benefits of the brand. And so this is where the tension lies, is that we're trying to introduce a new product category, which historically wasn't legal, but also we sort of got this Wild West of these companies trying to enter this disrupted market and try to establish a reputation for themselves.
Right, but so if you, if what do you think the companies would like to do? Who's the target audience? What would they like to do if there were no rules around it, let's say?
Well, I think you're going to find different views depending on which company you talk to. And so I think those that started with, were sort of the pioneers of the medical marijuana, they tried to tech it up. If you go back and look at their arguments and the rhetoric early on, like 4 or 5, even 6 years ago, it was all about the science of marijuana and the proven benefits of consumption, and let's get measured. Let's guys in lab coats and test tubes and things like that. On the other hand, I think there's other producers that would maybe want to draw on pop culture because it's such an easy repository. It's always been there from Cheech and Chong forward.
Sure.
And so there's a lot of imagery.
Boy, Cheech and Chong's names come up a lot in the conversation on marijuana. Sorry, go ahead, Rebecca.
So a couple points I'd like to make. I think the first one is who is the customer?
Right.
The customer is everybody, right? Currently, according to StatsCan, 43% of Canadians over the age of 15 have at some point tried cannabis. So there isn't one customer. The customer is everyone that you know.
Right, but the companies, as you know, it's being made clear by Health Canada, you are not to target minors in this country with any of your advertising.
Absolutely, and the statistic that I just quoted was 15 plus, and and I don't think that no one wants to target minors, but I think that it's really important that we understand that people who consume cannabis. And that we move beyond the stereotype of who consumes cannabis and understand that people broadly consume cannabis. And I just want to pivot back really quickly to you were talking about the arguments that were being made in the early days of ACMPR. I just want to point out that really the people who fought for legalization and fair access to cannabis for medical use were not the current licensed producers. It was really a grassroots movement that was about compassionate care, largely for people who had, cancer or AIDS. There is a history of activism that we can't ignore that really brought us to the moment that we're at right now.
Michael, let me finish on this. What should consumers be wary of when sort of paying attention to the marketing of cannabis companies, if anything? What do you want to watch for in the advertising? What are you paying attention to?
I'd be looking for the truth. And so whenever there's claims made, I want to see substantiation. It's just like whenever I go buy food, I want to be able to look at the side and see what the nutritional content is, how much fat, how much salt, what the side effects are. And so let's start with the truth and making that a central part of the message. And then after that, there's always the brand imagery side. There you got to watch for the hype, because sometimes you don't want you're going to do harm to the industry if you overpromise basically and say it can do things that it's not proven to do yet. And that's what I think one of the risks is in this new point where we're starting to see all kinds of companies try to get the message out there. There's going to be some that are going to do it irresponsibly.
Okay, Rebecca, let me finish on you at that same point. What should consumers be paying attention to? And I'm sure some of the people you work with, how do you guide them in producing campaigns that stick to the law and can still allow a company to grow?
Well, no one can make any claims that are not supported factually. The existing language in the Act and the accompanying regulations limit the LP's ability to promote to messaging that is either informational or brand preference driving. So no one can make any claims that are not true or that are incorrect, nor does it's not the desire of the industry to do that. Everyone wants this to go well. The industry as a whole is extremely concerned and wants consumers to have positive experiences and to use responsibly. So there is alignment of goal from that perspective between the policymaker and the industry. I think that, it would have perhaps been more helpful to the customer if the industry had a little bit more latitude in terms of their ability to message. So I think like what we recommend to our customers, given that they can say, to our clients, given that they can say so few things, is that they maintain a very, very clear and specific focus on a given customer, understand how they can best guide, help, support that particular consumer through this very significant shift in public narrative and this cultural moment, and provide utility and value.
Just want to quickly finish with you on that, Michael. Health Canada's, what do you expect we'll see? I mean, you and others have said that we've got a bit of a maybe Wild West as we start this whole business off. Do you expect Health Canada will be disposed to crack down hard, or to see how companies do with a certain amount of latitude as this takes off?
Well, I think they want to see they want to see the companies do it right on their own without too much enforcement, but they got to keep their eyes open. It's not just about preaching to the choir to existing users, the advertising. It's also, there's going to be companies trying to get new people in
trying
here
to build a market,
to use it more often, to use different forms that didn't exist. And so there's lots of other layers of messaging that we got to keep an eye on.
All right, lots to watch for. Thanks to both of you for your perspectives on this. It's a whole new world, so we'll see how it unfolds. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Pleasure.